Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Space News for Friday, January 18th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kyle Henry. Let's talk about what's going on in space.
I never want to hold again.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Status check.
Go Delta.
5, 4, 3.
Ignition.
Our top story, the SpaceX demonstration mission 1 has received an actual sort of no earlier than launch date. And first off, the static fire is now no earlier than January 23rd, with launch happening no earlier than February 9th. And the Boeing uncrewed test flight is now scheduled for March, and it doesn't seem like the US government being shut down will actually postpone these launches anymore. So yeah, although it could, who knows? There's a lot of uncertainty in the US right now. But over in Iran, they had a launch that we missed on Tuesday's episode, so we're going to talk about it now. But they launched the Smorg rocket, and it carried the Param Earth observation satellite to orbit. That launch occurred Tuesday from the Khomeini spaceport, and it likely reached about 500 kilometers in altitude before it failed. The US has condemned this launch because it's Iran and we don't like Iran. And there's a lot of reason to condemn it. We don't want, in the US at least, we don't want Iran to be getting the capability to launch a missile with possible nuclear weapons and stuff. However, it should be noted, there's a lot of, even though rockets and missiles are very similar, there's a lot more that goes into developing a nuclear missile than developing a rocket. When you're developing a nuclear missile, you have to basically have it that it can be set up really quickly and launched really quickly in like a matter of like 20 minutes. There's also the fact that if you're building a nuclear missile, you also have to have a reentry system for your bomb, and that's something that I don't even think North Korea has demonstrated yet, the ability to have a bomb re-enter the atmosphere. So there's understandably a reason to condemn this launch, but to just say that it is Iran getting closer to a nuclear bomb and a nuclear missile, it's not 100% that. So yeah. But switching over to SpaceX and Blue Origin, they have both given out updates on their rockets in the last couple of days. SpaceX has released a new version of their Payload user guide. And as far as we can tell, there's no major news from it. However, one of the interesting things that was included was a artist's rendering of a Falcon 9 and a Falcon Heavy. And interestingly enough, the Falcon 9 had the black interstage that we have become accustomed to with Block 5. However, the Falcon Heavy did not, and it did feature the titanium grid fence over the old aluminum ones. So if this rendering is to be believed, it seems like Falcon Heavy will not be sporting a black interstage. Instead, will have the old white interstage. But yeah. But over at Blue Origin, they have released a new animation for New Glenn. And really, the only difference between this animation and the old animation they released a few years ago is it seems like the landing gear have now been redesigned. And the upper stage is now a dual-engine upper stage. But we kind of already knew that. That was news maybe the beginning of last year, sometime around there. It was before I was recording, I think. But yeah. And down in Cape Canaveral, 2 launch pads might be getting new occupants. One is definitely, the other one is they're still working out the deal. First up, Launch Complex 16 will be getting the new occupant of Relativity Space. They have signed on for a 5-year multi-user agreement. This basically means that while Relativity will be the prime user, people in the area could still use this pad. However, if they fulfill requirements, they will sign on to a 20-year exclusive lease of the pad, which basically makes Launch Complex 16 theirs to use. Interestingly enough, with Relativity Space, they plan on using about a rocket that is about 95% 3D printed, which is something that I don't think we've seen at all. We've seen 3D printing in rocket making, but something that is mostly rocket or 3D printed is something a bit unheard of. But Launch Complex 16, they've said, will be ready for flight, or will be set up for flights in 2020. Now, Launch Complex 16 began its career as a Titan 1 and Titan 2 pad. It eventually became a Pershing's rocket pad. It was first used in 1959, and it was last used in March of 1988. And the other pad that might be getting a new occupant soon is Launch Complex 20. And the reason we say, and this is the one that we're not really sure about, or we're not certain that it is going to be who the new occupant is going to be. But we believe right now that Space Florida and Firefly are in talks to basically have Firefly use this pad. However, it has not been disclosed who the new occupant is. However, the code name that they're using is a slight allusion to a firefly. Like I think it's an allusion to a moth or something. I'm not 100% on that. So we're almost 100% certain that it's Firefly, but they haven't publicly stated that it is. And this deal has not been finalized yet, so we'll probably be seeing more on it later on in the year or early next year as they really work to finalize this deal. And besides that Iranian launch that we had, there was one other launch in the last couple of days, and that was an Epsilon launch with the RAPIS-1. It successfully deployed the satellite to orbit for JAXA. It was delayed from its initial launch date, but did launch last night at around 7:50 p.m. Eastern Time. And we have 2 launches coming up in the next couple of days. The first is a Delta IV Heavy with the National Reconnaissance Office Launch 71. That will be happening from Vandenberg at 2:05 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:05 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. And that is a classified spy satellite, and it's not certain where this is going, likely polar, but it could also be going to a retrograde orbit. And over in China, we have our other launch coming up in the next couple of days, and that is a Long March 11 with the Jilin 1. It will launch from Jiuquan on Monday the 21st. No launch date has been released, and this is an imaging satellite and is going to an unknown orbit. And finally, something that we don't talk about a lot is actual space besides space flight. So we're going to talk about one thing that is coming up in space, and that is there is a lunar eclipse for the Americas, all 3, North, South, and Latin America. And that eclipse is happening Sunday into Monday. Fingers crossed that the weather holds up for here. We've been sort of on and off with whether or not it will be clear. We're supposed to get I think right now we're at 5 inches of snow tomorrow, so it's going to be fun. But, as I said, it will be visible from most of the Western Hemisphere, and the eclipse will begin around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with the full eclipse beginning at 11:41 p.m. Eastern Time and ending around 12:43. I believe these are the times that I had for my area, so they might change depending on where you're at. I will link down below a place where you can find when the eclipse begins for you and when it ends for you. But it should be interesting. Hopefully the weather holds up, and yeah. But I'm Kyle Henry. Thank you so much for watching. We post newscasts like this every Tuesday and Friday. So if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date on what's going on in space. We also post the sources for today's stories in the description down below so you can check our facts. And if something doesn't seem right, let us know. We strive for 100% accuracy in our coverage. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.